At his own wedding, a groom's arrogance leads to him making a shocking accusation against an NBA legend. See how a moment of ignorance turns into a lesson in humility. Like, subscribe, and tell us where you are watching from in the comments. The grand wedding of Justin Harvey and Chloe Robinson was something to see. It was held in the big gardens of a fancy estate, with every little thing planned just right. Guests in fancy clothes sipped champagne under twinkling fairy lights, while a live orchestra played sweet, happy music in the background. The sound of joyful chatter filled the air as friends and family mixed, enjoying the fancy event. Justin, the 27-year-old groom, was right in the middle of it all. In his sharp white tuxedo, he looked like a man who had everything going for him. He smiled wide at the compliments from his friends and family. But under that charm, Justin had a bit of an attitude that could seem pretty stuck up. As Justin walked around, joking with his groomsmen and saying hi to distant relatives, he noticed his gold watch. It was a special heirloom from his rich grandpa, now with his initials on it. It showed off his family's wealth and status, and he hardly ever took it off. When the cocktail hour started, Justin took off the watch to fix his cufflinks, putting it down on the edge of a table near the wedding cake. A guest called his name, so he left it there for a moment. When he came back, the watch was gone. Justin's heart jumped. He looked all over the table, moving napkins and champagne glasses around. His prized possession had disappeared. "Where is it?" he whispered, his face worried. He called his best man Kimberly over and told him what happened. "Are you sure you left it here?" Kimberly asked, looking around the busy room. "Of course I'm sure," Justin snapped, his voice quiet but sharp. "I put it right here. Someone must have taken it." Justin's eyes scanned the room until they landed on Shaquille O'Neal, a tall figure by the buffet table. SHAQ, in a well-fitted black suit and shiny shoes, seemed confident and was talking quietly with another guest. Justin didn't know who he was, which only made him more suspicious. Kimberly hesitated, sensing what Justin was thinking. "Justin, don't jump to conclusions. It could have been misplaced." But Justin wasn't listening. Anger and frustration made him jump to judge. "I don't know who he is," Justin muttered, squinting at Shaquille. "He doesn't look like he belongs here. I bet he knows something about this." "Justin, calm down," Kimberly whispered, looking around at the other guests, but Justin had already decided. He marched over with determination. The lively chatter around him started to hush as people noticed his determined look. By the time he got to Shaquille, many guests were already watching, their curiosity at its peak. "You there," Justin called out, his voice sharp and accusing. Shaquille turned to him, his face calm but curious. "Yes," he answered politely, looking Justin in the eye. "Did you see a gold watch on that table over there?" Justin asked, pointing to the spot by the cake. Shaquille raised an eyebrow, his voice steady. "No, I didn't." Justin folded his arms, his voice getting louder. "Really? It's kind of funny how it vanished. And you're the only one here I don't know. Are you sure you know nothing about it?" Shaquille's face stayed calm, though a hint of irritation showed. "I'm sure I haven't touched your watch." The room went quiet as more people turned to watch the scene unfold. Chloe, with her bridesmaids nearby, froze in shock. "Justin, what are you doing?" she whispered, rushing to his side. Justin ignored her, his frustration spilling over. "You say you didn't see it, but how can I trust you're telling the truth? People like you always think you can get away with stuff." His words struck like a slap, their meaning clear. Gasps spread through the crowd. If you were in Shaquille's shoes, what would you do? Let us know in the comments. Also, subscribe to the channel. Shaquille's calm wavered for a second, but he quickly pulled himself together. "People like me?" Shaquille echoed, his voice now quieter but with a hint of anger. "What do you mean by that?" Justin just shrugged, his arrogance clear. "You know what I mean. You don't fit here. This isn't your kind of place." Shaquille stepped closer, his tall figure imposing but not threatening. I would advise you to think about what you're saying, he said quietly, his voice firm. Not for my sake, but for yours. Justin, stop it, Chloe hissed, pulling at his arm. You're making a fool of yourself. Justin shook her off, his voice rising. Someone needs to say it, Chloe. He can't just come in here and act like he's above everyone. Shaquille looked at him, his expression one of controlled anger. He took a deep breath, not letting Justin's words push him further. I don't need to prove anything to you, he said simply. Before Justin could reply, another voice broke through the tension. Justin, that's enough. The commanding voice was Anthony Harvey, Justin's father, a tall, imposing man in his early 60s. Anthony's presence demanded respect. He moved through the crowd, his face showing both anger and disappointment. Dad, Justin started, but Anthony cut him off with a sharp gesture. Not another word, Anthony said firmly. He turned to Shaquille, his expression softening. Mr. O'Neill, I am so sorry for my son's behavior. I had no idea this would happen. Shaquille nodded, his calm exterior returning. Apology accepted, Mr. Harvey, but perhaps your son should be the one apologizing. Anthony turned back to Justin, his voice cold. Do you even know who this man is? Justin hesitated, his confidence suddenly replaced by unease. Number he is Shaquille O'Neal, Anthony said, his voice rising slightly with respect. One of the greatest basketball players of all time, a philanthropist, and a friend who helped our family in ways you could never imagine. Justin's jaw dropped, his face turning pale. The weight of his actions began to sink in as the murmurs of the guests grew louder. Wait. What? Justin stammered. Yes, Anthony continued, his tone sharp. Years ago, when our family was struggling to pay rent, feed ourselves, and pay for your school fees, SHAQ came to our rescue. He donated to charities we supported, and his influence helped turn our business around. Without him, this wedding wouldn't have been possible. For the first time, Justin realized the depth of his mistake. The entire crowd at the wedding stood frozen in stunned silence, their attention fixed on the tense standoff between Justin, his father Anthony, and Shaquille O'Neal. The weight of Anthony's revelation hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. Justin, the once confident groom, now stood speechless, his arrogance crumbling under the weight of his father's words. Justin's mouth opened and closed as though he were searching for an explanation, a defense, anything to justify his behavior, but nothing came out. The gravity of his mistake began to settle in, and the realization that Shaquille O'Neal, the man he had so casually humiliated, was not just a guest, but a pivotal figure in his family's success made his cheeks burn with shame. Wait. Justin finally managed to stammer, his voice shaky. You're saying he helped us? Him? Anthony's jaw tightened, his disappointment clear. Yes, Justin. Shaquille O'Neal is the reason this wedding is even happening today. Without his help years ago, this family wouldn't have been able to afford anything, let alone this grand event. Anthony turned to address the gathering crowd, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Some of you might not know this, but there was a time when Harvey Industries was almost bankrupt. We had taken risks that didn't pay off, and no bank would give us a loan. I was desperate and ashamed, thinking I had let my family down. That's when I met Shaquille O'Neal. He barely knew me, yet he believed in our vision and supported us in ways that kept us going. Without him, I wouldn't have been able to rebuild. Everything we have today is partly thanks to his generosity and faith in us. The guests murmured amongst themselves, shocked by the story. Eyes shifted back to Shaquille, who stood silent and composed, his expression unreadable. Chloe, Justin's bride, looked at him with newfound respect while Justin seemed to shrink under everyone's gaze. Dad, Justin began weakly. I didn't know. That's the problem, Justin, Anthony snapped, his voice firm but filled with disappointment. You didn't know, yet you accused a man, an honored guest, of stealing without any evidence. And worse, you let prejudice guide your actions. Do you know how wrong that is? Justin looked down at his shoes, unable to meet his father's eyes. The guilt was too much, but his father wasn't done. And let me be clear, Anthony went on, his voice getting a bit louder. This isn't just about the watch. It's about how you treated Mr. O'Neill, letting your own biases blind you. I thought I taught you better than this, but you've shown everyone who you really are. Shaquille, who had stayed quiet during Anthony's speech, finally spoke. His voice was calm but had a power that made everyone listen. Mr. Harvey, he said, looking at Anthony, while I appreciate your words, I think it's important that Justin hears this from me too. Anthony stepped back, showing his respect for Shaquille by letting him speak. Everyone's attention was on Shaquille as he turned to Justin, his look strong and unwavering. Justin felt the full impact of Shaquille's presence. His tall figure seemed to tower over him, not just in height but in how he carried himself with dignity, making Justin feel smaller than ever. Justin, Shaquille started, his voice steady and clear. I get that emotions can be intense in situations like this. Losing something important can upset anyone, but the way you dealt with this wasn't just wrong, it was offensive. Justin flinched, but Shaquille kept going. You didn't know who I was, yet you felt you could shame me in front of everyone here. You assumed the worst about me because of how I look, and let your prejudice decide your actions. Do you understand what you've done? Justin nodded a little, but Shaquille wasn't finished. This isn't about the watch, he echoed Anthony's words. It's about character. It's about how we treat people, especially those different from us. What you did tonight says more about you than it does about me. The crowd was silent, focused on every word Shaquille said. Even the orchestra had stopped, their instruments silent as they watched. But I'm not here to shame you, Justin. Shaquille's tone softened a bit. I'm here to teach you a lesson. Life gives you chances to grow beyond your ignorance. This is one of those moments. The question is, will you learn from it or keep going down the same path? Justin finally looked up, his eyes full of shame and regret. I'm sorry, he said, his voice just a whisper. Shaquille nodded, but his face stayed serious. Words are good, Justin, but actions speak louder. If you really mean it, then prove it. Not just to me, but to everyone you meet. Let this moment change you for the better. Justin's dad, Anthony, stepped forward, his voice firm but supportive. Justin, this is your chance to do the right thing. Apologize properly and learn from this mistake. I won't tolerate this kind of behavior in our family. Justin took a deep breath, gathering what courage he could. He turned to Shaquille, his voice shaking. Mr. O'Neill, I can't say how sorry I am for what I said and did tonight. It was wrong, and there's no excuse for it. I've been arrogant and blind to my own ignorance, but I promise you I'll do everything I can to change. Shaquille looked at Justin for a moment, then held out his hand, his grip firm and his face softened by a faint smile. Apology accepted, he said simply while shaking Justin's hand. The crowd burst into applause and relieved whispers. The tension in the room started to fade, replaced by a feeling of hope and reconciliation. Chloe stepped forward, placing a hand on Justin's arm and whispering, "Thank you for doing the right thing." Anthony turned to Shaquille, his face filled with gratitude. Mr. O'Neill, I can't thank you enough for everything, not just for tonight, but for all you've done for our family. I'm deeply sorry for my son's behavior, and I promise you he will learn from this. Shaquille smiled faintly, never losing his composure. Don't thank me, Mr. Harvey. Your kindness to me in the past has always meant a lot. I just hope you'll make sure that your son grows into a man who values that same kindness and respect. Anthony nodded seriously, his respect for Shaquille growing even more. The moment felt like a turning point, not just for Justin, but for everyone who had seen the confrontation. The ceremony eventually continued, but the atmosphere had changed. Conversations were deeper, and guests who might have judged Shaquille before now looked at him with admiration. Justin stayed quiet for most of the evening, humbled by what had happened, but determined to make amends, not just to Shaquille, but to himself. The wedding ceremony went on, but the air was still thick with the effects of the dramatic confrontation. Guests whispered quietly, occasionally looking at Justin, who was unusually quiet. and at Shaquille, who carried himself with his usual grace and dignity. Justin stood at the altar next to his bride, Chloe, his hands trembling as he held hers. He tried to focus on the vows they were sharing, the promises of love and commitment, but his mind was elsewhere. The shame of what had happened just moments before weighed on him. The racist comments he had made to Shaquille, the false accusation of theft, and the sobering realization of who Shaquille truly was. These thoughts clouded his mind, overshadowing what should have been the happiest day of his life. As Chloe softly spoke her vows, she gave Justin's hand a reassuring squeeze, as if to silently tell him, "We'll get through this." Her words, filled with love and hope for their future, gave Justin a small bit of comfort. Shaquille, sitting among the guests with quiet dignity, watched the ceremony with a calm look. His posture showed the confidence of someone who knew his own value and wouldn't let others' ignorance bring him down. While the events of the evening had shaken the wedding, Shaquille had no intention of letting bitterness stay. He believed in the power of change and hoped that this humbling moment would help Justin grow. After the ceremony, the newlyweds went into the reception hall for their first dance. Guests clapped as Justin and Chloe moved to the gentle tune of the live band, but Justin still felt uncomfortable. He thought everyone was watching and judging him. Chloe, always aware, leaned close during the dance and whispered, "Justin, let it go. What's done is done. You've said sorry, now show everyone you can improve." Her words, though simple, made a big impact. Justin nodded slightly, his determination growing. He would not let the night end without starting to make amends. As the reception got lively, Justin saw Shaquille near the bar, talking quietly with Anthony. Justin paused, feeling scared and ashamed, but Anthony's firm yet encouraging look told him to go on. With a deep breath, Justin walked over, his steps unsure but resolute. "Mr. O'Neill," Justin said quietly, catching both Shaquille and Anthony's attention. "May I have a word?" Shaquille turned to look at him, his face calm but attentive. "Of course." Justin looked nervously at his dad, who nodded slightly before stepping away to give them privacy. Now alone with Shaquille, Justin felt the seriousness of the moment. "I wanted to say something earlier," Justin started, his voice soft, "but I couldn't find the right words. I know I've already apologized, but I need to say it again. I was wrong, so completely, unforgivably wrong. I let my own ignorance and prejudice guide my actions and disrespected you in a way that no one should ever be treated. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope you can find it in your heart to accept my apology." Shaquille looked at Justin carefully, his deep, thoughtful eyes steady. After a moment, he spoke, his voice calm but firm. "Justin, what you said and did tonight was deeply hurtful, not just to me, but to everyone who saw it. But I believe in giving second chances. What matters now isn't just the apology, but what you do from now on. Words fade, actions show who you really are." Justin nodded seriously, his posture straightening. "I promise you, Mr. O'Neill, I'll be different. Tonight has been a wake-up call, and I'll do whatever it takes to become a better person. I'm ashamed of who I was, but I want to change." Shaquille extended his hand, his grip firm, and his expression softened with a slight smile. "I'll hold you to that promise," he said simply. Justin let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. "Thank you," he said quietly, moved by Shaquille's kindness. The two men parted, and as Shaquille returned to his seat, Justin felt a new sense of purpose. For the first time, he saw the privilege and prejudice that had shaped his views, and he decided to face and change those biases, no matter how tough the journey might be. In the weeks after the wedding in Crestview, Justin started his journey to improve himself. It wasn't easy. Admitting his faults took humility and courage he didn't know he had. He began by learning more, reading books and going to talks about racial equality and the history of systemic racism. He talked to mentors and community leaders, asking how to get rid of the biases he'd grown up with. Justin also started volunteering at local groups that help marginalized communities. He spent his weekends mentoring kids from tough backgrounds, helping them with school and their dreams for the future. Through this, he learned more about the challenges others face and saw how much he had taken for granted. Most importantly, Justin wrote to Shaquille. He sent letters thanking him, explaining how the confrontation at the wedding had changed his life. Even though Shaquille didn't write back much, he sent short notes to show he noticed Justin's efforts. Over time, people saw how Justin had changed. He became more thoughtful, more caring, and more aware of how his words and actions affected others. His dad, Anthony, saw this change and was really proud. "You've come a long way, son," he said one night. "I think Shaquille would be proud of who you're becoming." Months later, Justin reached out to Shaquille again, asking for a meeting. Shaquille, interested to see how Justin had grown, agreed. They met at a small, quiet cafe, very different from the fancy wedding. When Shaquille arrived, Justin stood up to greet him, showing he was now more humble and respectful. "Thank you for meeting me, Mr. O'Neill," Justin said with sincerity. Shaquille gave a small smile and sat down. "Call me SHAQ," he said. "What can I do for you, Justin?" Justin took a deep breath. "I just wanted to thank you, not just for forgiving me, but for changing my life. The way you handled that night showed me what real strength and dignity are. I've been trying hard to be a better person, and I owe that to you." Shaquille nodded, looking thoughtful. "I'm glad to hear that. Growing isn't easy, but it's important. Remember, this isn't the end of your journey. Keep pushing yourself and help others too." Justin smiled, his thanks clear. "I will thank you, SHAQ, for everything." Their meeting was short but meaningful. Justin left feeling more determined, while Shaquille felt good knowing his message had touched someone who really needed it. Justin's change became an example of how being humble, learning, and wanting to change can make a difference. His story encouraged people in Crestview to look at their own biases and work towards a more understanding community. Shaquille, always leading quietly, kept helping people in Riverwood City. He didn't look for praise, but his actions said more than words could. Years later, at another family event in Crestview, Anthony Harvey gave a toast, his voice full of pride. "To Shaquille O'Neal, who not only helped our family in tough times, but also helped my son become the person he was meant to be. Thank you for showing us what true kindness and strength look like." Shaquille smiled and lifted his glass, his eyes meeting Justin's across the room. At that moment, words weren't needed. Their story, which started with conflict, had turned into one of redemption, growth, and the powerful impact of grace. If you like this story, hit that like button, subscribe, and share it with your friends for more stories.